This is BBC 5 Live.
Right, your call. 8 minutes past 9 o'clock. We've got Fran in Leicester. Morning, Fran. Hello to Clare in Surbiton. Hello to Suzanne in Reading. Thank you all so much for joining us. Good morning.
Hi. Hello.
Morning.
Fran, and we can all talk to each other about this because I know there is, as I was saying, so much common experience. Fran, what is your situation?
Our situation is that our 21-year-old son no longer lives with us, and we had to make the really difficult decision that he left the family home when he was 17 because we couldn't meet his needs anymore, and he was showing an awful lot of challenging, unmanageable behaviour. He was hurting our younger two sons, and we had to come to what was one of the most difficult decisions of our lives, that he had to move out.
What was the challenging behaviour, if I may ask?
He was biting, he was hitting, he was throwing furniture, anything that he could get. He had a good aim. He was very obsessed with me and only wanted me to do his care, and anyone who came near me would get pinched, hurt, and he was unhappy with that behaviour. It wasn't making him happy either. So it was a very well, it's like living in a nightmare, to be honest. I look back now and I think, goodness, how did we ever get through that? And my other children started suffering quite significantly because of it.
In what ways?
Well, they were 14 and 11 at the point he left home. My 11-year-old was having tics. They're actually incredibly well-adjusted children, but we'd sat them down when we were on a respite holiday away from my eldest son, and we had plans to move our eldest son into a bungalow that we were in the process of buying so that he could live in supported living. That was taking its time, and I just sat with them on Cromer Pier and said, were they coping? And my middle son, who normally was very placid, just said, I'm not. He wasn't coping, and he cried, and he felt awful, he felt guilty, but he really wasn't coping with how things were at home.
How old was he?
He was 14 at the time. We've been flagging it up for a long while to social services and saying, you know, this is a safeguarding issue, and the whole family is being affected massively. But at that point, we had to say, well, we actually had a phone call from the respite place where my eldest son was, saying that his behaviour was unmanageable and could we go and pick him up. And at that point, I just thought, they can't cope with it, and we're having to live with this every day. We can't carry on like this.
What was it like for you, respite? How did you feel when you were on holiday, when you were away from the situation? Did you have that guilt? We've been hearing about that from a lot of our listeners this morning.
We had guilt. When we first started having respite, it felt like it was a relief. I think as he got older and older and things got more challenging with him, I actually did spend the time that I was on respite dreading him coming back, if I'm completely honest. And it felt like we were almost on hold as a family, waiting for him to come back and the situation that we were living in to return.
It must be an awful feeling.
It was dreadful. I mean, I experienced so much guilt as a mum. I love all three children enormously, and it was an incredibly difficult time, and having to make a decision that he couldn't live with us broke my heart. I'm just really thankful that it's worked out so well, and he's very, very happy, and so many of his challenging behaviours disappeared once he left the family home.
That's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yes, definitely.
But he's calmed down.
Yeah, no end. He's calm with all of us now.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's lovely. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything more, but you don't know that when you make that decision.
No.
So it was a dreadful time, but it has worked out brilliantly, and my other sons have a great relationship with him, and on the whole, we don't see any challenging behaviour when we see him now.
Well, you set it out there, all the feelings and the twists and turns and the guilt, the feelings of guilt and the huge challenges so well. Suzanne, were you listening to that? Because I know you have a situation with a younger child than that, don't you? So
yes, it's extraordinary listening to Fran, actually, because I can see all that in our future. Our son is 8. He's profoundly autistic, but yes, we're already considering residential care for him. My husband's been saying for a couple of years it's the way we need to go, and I've been resisting it, but recently we've just realised we can't carry on anymore, and we will be in that situation that Fran has been in. I'm trying to protect my girls, who are now 6 and 1, and we can already see the signs with our 6-year-old of her anxiety, and our 1-year-old, you know, she's covered in scratches from her big brother. Every time he approaches her, she covers her head, and it's just not a safe environment to bring up, you know, two girls in. It's not working for any of us, so we have to consider that now, although he does seem so young. It utterly breaks our hearts.
What you were saying, Fran, it's the heartbreak, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I think I've never experienced such a depth of brokenness over the decisions that we've had to make. Prior to him leaving home as well, there were big decisions we had to make. Him first going to respite. He doesn't speak. He can't look after himself. He has a sort of the learning age of a 2 to 3-year-old, and you're completely entrusting that very vulnerable child to other people, and that's a huge thing. So every step along the way, there's been little bits of broken heart, but I think for me, that decision in Cromer it killed me.
Yeah, the problem is that our children are so incredibly vulnerable. The thought of anybody else caring for them, it's no parent should have to go through that, and no parent takes it lightly. But the only reason that anyone would decide to put their child into residential care is if they just simply can't cope anymore, and if they feel it's best for everybody in the family, including the child. You know, and Fran, your experience bears that out. Fran, can I ask you how often you see your son now?
Well, we see him at least once a week. He's now living in supported living rather than residential care, which is a slightly different setup and one that we felt was more beneficial for him and his life. We see him at least once a week. He comes to the family home every 2 to 3 weeks for lunch. We have to balance it out because, to be honest, if we see him too much, we see a revisit of some of the behaviours. Yeah. So we have to kind of balance out what he is happy with. And I've got to say, it's easy for me to say on hindsight, but he is an incredibly happy young man. And I'm so proud of him, and he is living a wonderful life. But it hasn't been easy from our point of view at all. But that's how frequently we see him. We've adjusted it over the years, depending on how he is and how he responds. He's never come home again to stay overnight. Right. That was a decision that we made and have actually stuck to, because as soon as I'd taken him away on holiday since he left home overnight, and over a 3-night period saw like an almost massive deterioration of his behaviour, and all the behaviours from home started coming back again. So, you know, we haven't done that again.
Claire.
Hi there.
Fascinating listening to Fran and Suzanne, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a story that I've heard a lot, and it's unfortunately very common that, you know, parents like us have to go through the huge emotional turmoil. The journey that we face as, you know, as parents of children with special needs can at times be so painful. And I'm in a similar situation. You know, I don't have a child with Asperger's or ASD. There is no diagnosis for mine, which in some ways makes that, you know, it's you're sort of feeling your way around in the dark. My son's 10, and I'm also looking at potentially putting him into residential now. I'm a single parent. I've had to be self-employed because the therapies, the hospital appointments, the administration that's involved in trying to jump through the education hoops, the NHS hoops, in order to be able to get where you need to go to access the support is really, really tough. And for me now, it's actually made me quite unwell. The journey for me has meant that I've met lots of parents along the way, and I've actually started a business now, which is supporting other parents who are in my situation, coaching them through these emotional pitfalls that we face, and trying to empower them with knowledge in order to help them to look after themselves. Because I've seen so many times where parents are just absolutely, completely exhausted and wrung out. And when you've got siblings and you're having to put all of your energy into the child who's, you know, got the ASD diagnosis, or the complex barriers to learning, or the speech and language deficits, or whatever the diagnosis might be, you know, they take up so much of your time that, you know, quite often the siblings are left behind.
And everyone needs a break.
Everyone needs a break, but actually, for me, you know, accessing that respite has been nigh on impossible.
I'll come back to you, because Suzanne, what about accessing the respite for you?
Yes, I mean, we do get respite. We get 2 nights a month. We've had that for about a year. We had to fight very hard to get that. It doesn't always happen. For example, this weekend it was cancelled. And then I had a devastated 6-year-old, because you plan everything, you know, based on this time you're going to have. Respite isn't a break for the parents. If you have other children, it's time to spend quality time with your other children and do all the things that you just can't do when you're together. We can't do anything as a family. We can't really take our son anywhere, the level of his needs. So, you know, everybody misses out, and it's so important to have those times, to have some semblance of a normal life for your other children. But, you know, you can't really rely on respite. And we found, like Fran said with her son now, when he does come home after 2 nights away, we then have a week of hell because his behaviour's regressed so much. So we need that time with our girls, but we pay a really, really awful price for it, and we know that's coming as well, which clouds over the whole time. So, you know, we're lucky compared with a lot of parents in that we do have access to some respite, but it doesn't solve the problems in any way.
No. I think that's it, because our children need so much routine and consistency that, you know, having the respite and the sleepovers, as you said, the stress around their vulnerability and who's going to be taking care of them is one thing, but then it's the change in routine for them, which then means that there's a backlash when they come home again.
Exactly.
And you're always put in an artificial situation after years. Your respite is very artificial, because what you're living in the rest of the time is incredibly challenging circumstances, and so it stops feeling like a rest. And to be honest, you get to a point where you're so tired that all you want to do is sleep when your disabled child is away from the home. But like you said, your other 2 children, or how many children you have, they need you. That's the time we used to have sleepovers with their friends and things like that, and you know, you'd be exhausted from that.
Yeah, exactly.
And what must it be like for them to go, well, this is what our lives could be like? You know, I think somebody mentioned that earlier, and we definitely feel that it's like, wow, this is what your life could have been. Which is really kind of digs the knife in. But, you know, we're old enough to deal with those emotions, well, to a certain extent. But, you know, my 6-year-old and my 1-year-old, I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like for them.
I mean, when Joshua first left home, my other 2 boys, who at the point where he left were 14 and 11, they spent probably the first year of his leaving home just being in the lounge in the evenings. They wouldn't go up to their bedrooms, and I suddenly realised that they were almost making up for the evenings where they weren't able to spend time with us and be close to us because of how his behaviour would be. And so, you know, rather than being teenagers going off to their bedrooms and shutting their doors, they literally stuck to our sides for a good year before they ventured off.
And that just shows, you know, you did the right thing in the effect it was having on them.
My